Most people don't wake up one day and decide to control others. Control doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives quietly. Disguised as concern. Disguised as responsibility. Disguised as love. It starts with small things. Let me know when you get home. Just checking if everything is okay. I only ask because I care. And at first, it feels normal. Even healthy. Because no one teaches us the difference between trust and control. We are raised to believe that caring means watching. That responsibility means checking. That love means staying alert. So we learn early that letting go is dangerous. As children, we are monitored constantly. Adults check our actions. Correct our choices. Guide every step. And this makes sense, for a child. But the lesson stays longer than it should. We grow up, yet the instinct remains. If I don't watch closely, something will go wrong. So as adults, we repeat the pattern. In relationships. At work. In leadership. In family. We keep our hands close to the wheel. Not because we are controlling people. But because we are controlling outcomes. Or at least, that's what we tell ourselves. Control feels responsible. It feels like you're doing your job. Like you're being careful. Like you're preventing problems before they happen. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Control is not about prevention. It's about fear. Fear of being surprised. Fear of being disappointed. Fear of losing relevance. Fear of losing power. Control is what happens when we don't trust life to move without our interference. The strange thing about control is how good it feels in the beginning. When you control, you feel useful. Needed. Important. You know what's happening. You know who did what. You know where things stand. Information becomes your comfort. And slowly, without noticing, you start needing that comfort. You check more often. You ask more questions. You involve yourself where you're not needed. Not because things are going wrong. But because you're afraid they might. And this is where control becomes dangerous. Because people can feel it. They feel the tension in your questions. They hear it in your tone. They sense the expectation behind your words. And something inside them shifts. They don't feel supported anymore. They feel observed. When someone feels observed, they change. They become careful. They become quiet. They stop sharing freely. Not because they're hiding something. But because openness feels unsafe under constant attention. They start thinking before every move. How will this be judged? Will this be questioned? Will this be corrected? And slowly, honesty disappears. Not replaced by lies. But by silence. Control does something subtle but powerful. It removes ownership. When every step is watched. Every decision checked. Every mistake corrected. People stop feeling responsible for outcomes. They wait. They ask for permission. They play it safe. Because when someone else is always watching, someone else always feels in charge. This is why control kills initiative. Not instantly. But slowly. At first, people still try. Then they hesitate. Then they stop. Not because they don't care. But because caring becomes risky. And here's the hardest part to accept. Most controlling people genuinely believe they are helping. They don't see themselves as controlling. They see themselves as protective. Involved. Responsible. But intention doesn't change impact. Control, no matter how softly applied, communicates one message. I don't believe things will be okay without me. And once that message is felt, trust is already damaged. Trust scares people more than they admit. Not because trust is dangerous, but because trust removes your illusion of control. When you trust someone, you are forced to accept a truth most people avoid. You cannot guarantee the outcome. You can't control how someone feels. You can't control what they choose. You can't control whether they stay, fail, or disappoint you. And for many people, that feels unbearable. Trust demands emotional exposure. When you trust, you are no longer protected by distance. You are no longer hiding behind rules or supervision. You are present. If something goes wrong, you feel it directly. There is no system to blame. No process to hide behind. No, I told you so, to protect your ego. Only vulnerability. This is why people replace trust with control. Control creates a buffer. A layer between you and disappointment. If you control the process, you can tell yourself, I did everything right. If it fails, it's not personal. Trust removes that shield. When you trust and something breaks, it hurts deeper. Trust also forces you to confront your ego. Because trusting someone means accepting. They might succeed without you. They might do things differently. They might not need your constant input. And that threatens identity. For people who define their value through usefulness, control becomes a way to stay relevant. If I am needed, I matter. If I let go, what's left of me? So instead of asking that question, they hold tighter. Trust also exposes insecurity. If you don't trust others, often it's because you don't trust your ability to handle loss. Loss of control. Loss of certainty. Loss of the image you have of yourself. Trust says, even if this fails, I will survive. Control says, I can't afford that risk. And yet, here's the irony. The more you try to protect yourself from pain, the more fragile you become. Because avoidance doesn't build strength. Exposure does. Trust is exposure. When you truly trust someone, you allow them to make real choices. Not safe choices. Real ones. And real choices include mistakes. This is where most people panic. They see mistakes as proof that trust was wrong. But mistakes are not a failure of trust. They are the cost of growth. Without mistakes, responsibility never matures. Without risk, character never forms. Trust changes how people see themselves. When someone knows they are trusted, they feel weight. Not pressure. Weight. The weight of knowing. This matters. I matter. That weight is uncomfortable. But it's formative. It pushes people to rise. Or it reveals that they won't. Both outcomes are valuable. Control hides truth. Trust reveals it. Under control, people behave. Under trust, people show who they are. This is why trust feels dangerous. Because you can't hide behind systems anymore. You see reality clearly. And not everyone wants that clarity. Trust also forces patience. Growth under trust is slower. Messier. Less predictable. There are no immediate results. No instant compliance. No clear metrics. Control gives fast obedience. Trust gives slow strength. And in a world addicted to speed, slow strength feels inefficient. But over time, something changes. People who are trusted stop needing permission. They stop asking what to do. They start thinking. They take responsibility even when no one is watching. They correct themselves. They carry weight without supervision. Not because they fear punishment, but because they respect the trust placed in them. This is why trust is rare. It requires emotional resilience. It requires ego discipline. It requires tolerance for uncertainty. Most people don't lack intelligence. They lack the emotional capacity to sit with not knowing. So they control instead. Trust doesn't mean everyone deserves it. Trust must be given gradually. Adjusted. Sometimes withdrawn. But when trust is present, real trust, it transforms relationships. Not into comfort, but into depth. There is always a cost. Control has a cost. Trust has a cost. The difference is not that one is free and the other is expensive. The difference is who pays, and when. Control demands payment immediately. It costs energy, attention, presence. You must always be involved. Always checking. Always adjusting. Nothing runs without you. At first, this feels powerful. But over time, it becomes exhausting. Because control never rests. People who control cannot relax. They listen for problems. They anticipate mistakes. They scan for signs that something might go wrong. Even in calm moments. Their mind is busy. And slowly, control turns into tension. There is another cost most people don't notice. Control isolates. When you control others, you stand above them. Not with them. You may be surrounded by people. But you are alone in responsibility. Everyone waits for direction. No one carries weight with you. And eventually, resentment appears. From them. And from you. You resent them for not stepping up. They resent you for not letting go. And both sides feel misunderstood. Trust pays its cost differently. Trust is expensive at the beginning. You invest before you see results. You tolerate mistakes. You endure uncertainty. There are moments where you doubt yourself. Moments where letting go feels like weakness. But trust compounds. Over time, trust multiplies capacity. You are no longer the center of every decision. Others think. Others act. Others carry responsibility. Not because they are forced. But because they own the outcome. And ownership changes behavior. This is where trust becomes power. Not loud power. Not visible power. Quiet power. The kind where things move even when you're not present. The kind where people act with integrity when no one is watching. The kind where loyalty replaces fear. In leadership, this is everything. Controlled teams wait. Trusted teams think. Controlled teams follow instructions. Trusted teams solve problems. Controlled teams look busy. Trusted teams create value. In relationships, the difference is just as clear. Control creates obedience, but kills intimacy. Trust creates vulnerability, but builds depth. Under control, people behave correctly. Under trust, people show up honestly. One creates safety on the surface. The other creates safety at the core. But here's the truth most people avoid. Trust will eventually reveal who should stay, and who shouldn't. And that scares people. Control keeps people around longer. Trust shows you reality faster. Not everyone can handle responsibility. Not everyone deserves access. Not everyone will rise. But control hides that truth. Trust exposes it. This is why trust feels risky. Because it removes illusions. Illusions about people. Illusions about yourself. Illusions about how much control you actually have. And here is the final realization. You never truly control people. You only control how much freedom you allow. And freedom will always reveal truth. Control tries to manage behavior. Trust shapes character. Behavior disappears when pressure is gone. Character remains. Strong people don't control because they are not afraid of outcomes. They know they can adapt. They know they can recover. They know they can survive disappointment. Weak people control because they need certainty. They need guarantees. They need things to stay predictable. Trust is not soft. Trust is not naive. Trust is not passive. Trust is disciplined courage. It is the ability to say, I don't need to own everything to be safe. Control tries to freeze life. Trust allows life to move. One is built on fear. The other on strength. And once you understand that difference, you stop trying to hold people in place. You start building environments where people can stand on their own.